it's got to be way more common than what we're seeing. Like,
Mhm.
obviously, the stuff I call out is stuff that's happening like now. Like every week, I could do a story on pedophilia in the martial arts, which is really sad, right?
Yeah.
But there are people out there that it seems that are aware that they're crossing a line, but they're also aware of the law. And so what they're doing is they're tiptoeing in this gray area where they're like, you know what, I'll groom this kid for a longer period of time. So that way, by the time it becomes legal, no one will see me as a pedophile. No one will see me as the bad guy. And it'll go under the radar because you can make it official now. You know, it's kind of a sick game that these people play. And
Right.
again, as we talked about before, I think that some of them probably, especially since they're still in relationships with these people who they dated,
Mhm.
they probably really do think that they were in love with a 12-year-old. Like they really do think that. Like that's their twisted process. That's really
Yeah.
jacked up.
And I think like I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say most of them are like that because a lot of these are like long-term relationships.
For sure.
But that doesn't make it good. Just because you believe you're the good guy doesn't make you the good guy. I think most people are going to be on the same boat of if you have a position of authority over like a 12-year-old or 14-year-old, and then you make them into the kind of person you want to date and you date them, that's not okay.
No.
But what do we do about it is the problem. Because like with the cases of pedophilia that you mainly deal with on your channel, somebody can get arrested and go to prison, which is at least some sort of deterrent. But with this, it's not necessarily illegal. And even in some of the cases that are illegal, it's virtually impossible to prove. So what can we put in place that can kind of like make this happen less?
You can get away with doing something under wraps for a really long time until it gets brought to the surface. Like right now, how many fingers am I holding up?
Yeah, great question.
You have no clue. You have
Right.
no clue, right? Because I'm hiding them. Now, if you started bringing attention and you started shining a light and putting it out in the open, everyone would know how many fingers you're holding up. Except for the blind, you know, we're not getting technical here, right? But
Yeah.
right, everyone would know. And so what happens is I preach this a lot. It's not about like having to put in place like these laws or anything like that. Like that takes a long period of time. What you really need is you need a community who gives a shit. Like just talking about something sometimes is enough to start fixing the problem. And right now, like I said, if you're a martial artist out there and in the last week you've bitched and moaned about the guy across the street charging too much, or you've complained that somebody's technique isn't good enough, or you've argued that someone got their belt too soon, and you're one of those people, right? But you didn't bring up the fact that there are all these pedophiles in the martial arts industry. You didn't take the time to share anybody's information about this kind of stuff to the world. You're a part of the problem. You were literally part of the problem. You're going, yeah, that's a lot of pedophilia over there. That's gross. All right, anyway, let's talk about these belt systems. Like, why would you ignore it? And so I think as a community, if we start talking about the actual real issues and start getting pissed off about the things we should really be pissed off about, like pieces of shit who are grooming 12-year-old kids, and we're not just like, yeah, it's a little weird that an adult has a 12-year-old's phone number. I'm sure it's fine. It's not. It's not okay. And I think that if we as a community start talking about it more and start showing how often and how common this is, what'll happen is those people who are thinking about doing that might have issues, might be putting themselves or thinking that martial arts is an easy avenue to take advantage of children. They might be less likely to do it because they know just how vicious this community can be when it comes to that shit. But right now, you know what those people see? They see an easy target because no one will care. People will keep doing it, and the community won't care because they're too busy talking about belt ranks. They're too busy complaining about that guy's armbar. Meanwhile, I'm going to diddle this kid over here. Like, that's basically what's happening. And, you know, I say it as a joke because I'm trying to soften the blow of the truth. But the truth is that we as a community are allowing this to happen. That is just the facts. I guarantee you this shit right now. I guarantee you two things. One, someone will have watched maybe the first 2 minutes of this video and will write a diatribe about all the things that we just talked about. I guarantee it.
Okay.
Comment sections. Two, I guarantee you those same people who will be complaining about the subject matter we're talking about don't have the balls to share this information and make sure that other people have eyeballs on the conversation. Guarantee. Right? Prove me wrong, comment section. Prove me wrong. I hope you share it. That's the point. I dare you, because what we should be doing is standing up defending kids. Like, if we're not doing that, then what the fuck are you doing? You think anybody gives a damn about your arm bar if you wind up like learning from this 15-time molester? No one cares that your arm bar is good. All they know is that you aided and abetted a pedophile because you turned a blind eye. Congratulations. Arm bar is great. You're a piece of shit.
Yeah. You bought a weapon from an evil regime is basically what you did.
You're like, where'd you get this plutonium? I'm sure it's up enough.
But I do think we might need some other kind of fix, like a cultural shift or something, just because like even if we're way better at looking out for and calling out for pedophiles, the problem is that the reason that like pedophiles become martial artists is because it's really just functionally easy to get away with pedophilia in martial arts. You get put in charge of kids and you're just implicitly trusted, and you get like alone time with the students. And like you were saying, you get kind of a de facto, almost cult-like atmosphere. So, and I think without addressing those things, even if we're a lot more aware of pedophiles and we talk about it a lot more, pedophiles will still gravitate towards martial arts because we still have that perfect storm of opportunities for them.
Well, I think that one of the things is something me and you have talked about before, not on this particular one, but I think that every martial arts school should be required to have a local federal background check on every employee. Because repeat offending is something that happens a lot in this industry. And like, if we look at a case like David Arnbeck, yes, I said his name is David Arnbeck, David, D-A-V-I-D, Arnbeck, A-R-N-E-B-C-K. David Arnbeck. I don't know if you guys heard his name or not, but anyway, in the case of David Arnbeck, he molested a 15-year-old girl in his home. Now, he's a second-degree black belt under Rickson Gracie, or he was. He still claims to be, but Rickson already wrote a letter saying that he is defunct. He's no longer part of his organization, even though on his website, he hasn't taken any of that information down. So when you look up Warriors Cove MMA, that's Warriors Cove MMA, run by David Arnbeck. Please feel free to look that up and heckle him. But when it comes down to their particular stuff, he took a plea deal. And in his plea deal, he claimed, I was too drunk to know what happened. There's a specific name for that plea deal. I don't have it off the top of my head, but that type of plea deal did not put him on a sex offender registry. He runs 3 martial arts studios today, still around kids. As much as we want to believe that martial arts is full of honor and integrity and all that other crap that people shove down your throat Miyagi style, it's not necessarily true. What we forget is it's just a job. We're paying for a service. And then that person has a skill, but that doesn't mean they have every skill. They're not your mentor if they don't want to be your mentor. They're not your dietitian if they're not registered, if they haven't went to school for it. They're not your strength and conditioning coach if they don't know what they're doing. They literally have a skill, and that particular skill is to teach you how to punch, kick, choke, throw people. Their job is to teach you how to hurt people. And in no other part of society ever have we ever put that on a pedestal, except for martial arts. It's baffling to me, you know?
And I know I've talked with you about this before, because one of my problems that I want fixed is the guru culture. Because like if you go to a martial arts school, the guy there presumably knows how to punch, kick, and throw people, and that's what he should be teaching. But like very, very often, probably partly because of the automatic, almost cult-like atmosphere that it lends itself to, they're automatically your life coach and your mentor and your dietitian and this, that, and the other. And martial artists don't necessarily know any of that. And that gives them a lot of power in your life if they're automatically your mentor and your life coach, especially when that expectation also exists for like your 12-year-old kid. And so now you're giving someone a ton of authority in a kid's life, and that person isn't qualified for any of this, doesn't need any background checks, might not know anything. And I feel like you've opened the door for it. So I think in my mind, part of the solution would be to say that martial arts instructors, you're there to teach me how to punch and kick. That's it. Then I go home. And you're not my life coach and my mentor and my this, that, and the other, especially for kids.
So whenever I teach kids now, because I don't do it as often as I used to, it used to be my full-time job as I was a martial arts instructor. So I teach kids, adults, and all. I run the gambit. And whenever I did teach kids, I had this like pre-made speech, prepackaged speech I've been saying for like over a decade now. And it's like one of my favorite speeches because you can really see wheels turn with parents. So like at the end of class, I usually do some type of a chat with the kids' classes. I never do it with adults. You're an adult. Figure your own shit out. You're a grown ass man or woman, right? But when it comes to like kids, it's an opportunity to teach them like how to apply what they learned outside of just hitting people. And so you get that opportunity. It's great, but you also get the parents' attention during that time. So I would sit all the kids down and I purposely sit them on the edge of the mat that was closest to wherever the parents were sitting. And every time, and if you're one of these parents, stop doing this shit. Every time, all the parents would be buried in their phones. Like they would just be buried. They wouldn't be listening, paying attention. And I would say, all right, kids, I'm going to teach you and your parents something today. All right, parents, do I have your attention? All right, and then I have to get them like broken away from their phone. And most of the time they would all pay attention because they thought it was important because it would apply to their child as well. I would let them know it's my job to teach your kids how to do this. It's my job to teach your kid how to choke. I teach him how to punch. I teach him how to throw. I teach him how to defend himself. That's my job. I teach them how. And then I would go around and I'd ask the kids, whose job is it to teach you when? And then they, kids would interact and stuff. And the answer is always, it's your parents' job to teach you when. I teach you how, they teach you when, because there has to be a separation of church and state here. I can't just go ahead and start tossing out every piece of advice ever because I don't know the parents' rules. Every parent is a little different when it comes to self-defense and what they expect. And so what that would automatically do is detach me outside of the mat. Like I'm here. This is where I exist. Out there, I'm Rob. In here, I'm Coach Rob. That there's a difference. Like you don't listen to everything I said. I think that it's important you don't listen to everything I said. You listen to the things that apply to the job I'm taught or I'm paid to do. My job is not to teach you when. And I think that a lot of coaches almost feel obligated to take over as that. They feel obligated to teach these giant moral lessons to kids. Like, not really, because that might conflict with what the parent is teaching them. And if you have two people teaching two different things, the kid's never going to get the lesson. So you have to be on the same page and you have to know where your boundaries are. And that's a major boundary. Trying to teach people when, it ain't your job, homie. Sorry. Like it ain't. Your job's to teach how. And if I start seeing a teacher crossing those boundaries without permission or without asked to do so, that's usually a big red flag for me.
Yeah, because it's good that you gave that speech. And like you said, most people wouldn't. And because like, if someone's automatically giving me power, it's hard to say, no, thanks, I don't want it. Most people aren't going to do that. And it's good that you specify to the kids and parents, hey, I'm not their parent. You need to parent them. All I'm doing is teaching them martial arts. But I don't think we should rely on the coaches to do that. I think we should automatically not give coaches that power and be aware that we teach when and they teach how.
But it's a tricky one because when I look at it, one of the things people have asked me to do, going back to your point, which is why I brought it up, is, well, how do we stop it? Like, what is the hardcore implement this and we can do that? Like, there's only been a couple things I can think of. Like, one, educate the masses better. Like, just give out as much information as possible and make it a little more mainstream as to what to expect.
Right.
Which is why I was talking about bringing things to light, making sure that people are aware what they're getting themselves into and what's expected. The other is requiring federal and local background checks, as we talked about before. But then I always hit a brick wall, which is something I get asked to do all the time. People say, well, why don't you start like a committee? And that committee regulates like the arts as a whole.
Yeah.
And that's where I start to have a moral dilemma, because I believe that would actually do the opposite of what we want, because absolute power corrupts absolutely. Like, you can't regulate it in such a way, because then what you're going to do is destroy it. You're just going to destroy it.
I think a lot of the older, crazier, less functional arts are going to be a lot more politically entrenched. And obviously giving a seat to every version of every martial art is not possible. Really, it's going to be like a dozen people, and it's all going to be controlled by one martial art that managed to grab that political power, and they're going to regulate all others out of existence.
It's that self-destructive thing that we talked about before. Like, it's already doing it now without that. Like, martial artists are eating each other alive all the time because of ego.
Yeah, and all you'd be doing with the committee is giving one of them legislative power.
I mean, I really do think it will boil down to self-regulation if you want to do it without corrupting it. That's hard, because now you have to get everybody on the same page. And like, The only things that, then that's, you know, another reason I took the path that I took was you can't get everybody on the same page about everything. Like, but we can all agree there shouldn't be pedophiles in the martial arts industry. We can all agree with that. So we can all at least focus and stop that. We can all agree that people shouldn't lie about their belt rank and fight record. Like, that's very basic stuff. There's no need to lie. No one really gives a shit, to be honest. If you were 0-0, John Donna here doesn't have a fight record. You're not telling me he doesn't produce great like competitors. You'd be wrong, you know. So like all of that is subjective to the individual's bias of what their personal goals are. It doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't make it right. It just makes it not matter. Who cares? Who gives a shit? That person's doing cardio kickboxing. Who cares? But with stuff like this, maybe we can all put an eyeball on, like, for instance, this pedophilia issue. And if we can get eyeballs on it, maybe that means more people will start stepping up to the plate to speak out against it. And maybe if more people speak out against it, then what we'll end up doing eventually, maybe we'll take a deficit at first, but then it'll come back, is we'll wind up getting people who come into the industry without fear of their instructor being a pedophile, because they know that this community will not tolerate that shit. You know, like jujitsu guys are willing to go to another country, fly to another country if they find out someone lied about their belt rank. The motherfucker will get on a plane tomorrow, fly with a group of dudes over there, beat that dude's ass, put him out of business, or try to anyway, because it's not how cults work. You're not going to put him out of business by beating him up, but they'll fly all the way over there to do that. Why aren't they knocking on Dave Arnbeck's door?
Yeah, and I see what you're saying, because, like, you know, if somebody lied about their belt rank 10 years ago and then eventually actually got that belt, and then like people find out, they are eaten alive on the internet. They are like lambasted 24/7 if you lied about your belt rank, which I get that, like, that doesn't matter, but also I'm fine with that. Like, if you just like go after liars in the industry, all right, that's not going to make the industry worse by any means. But I get what you're saying. We're like, if we had that same sort of attack dog mentality towards grooming and sexual abuse and whatnot, then, like, you know, any of these stories come out, any of these suspicious, oh, what a coincidental timing that was, kind of things happen, then like these people get buried. And obviously that's not quite going to solve the cases that we've already talked about that have already happened. They're already in a relationship.
And now those people are adults as well. So this is,
there's nothing you can do about that, except that those coaches won't get any more students.
Well, think about, like, if we had this conversation when that kid was 12 years old, right?
Yeah.
Would we have stopped that from happening? Like, that's a question that we have to ask ourselves. Like, with the community, if the community saw that happening when it was happening, not just the inside circle, not just the students who were there, but like as a whole, and the community saw that happening, could we have intervened? Like, could we have raised enough hell to put enough pressure on that person for that person to walk away from that situation? Or maybe we don't fix that one, but maybe the next 14-year-old case never happens. Maybe that 15-year-old case doesn't happen because of the conversation that we already started beforehand. And so that's kind of where I guess my point is that you can't go back in time and fix things that have already happened. It's just impossible. But we can learn from those things, and then we can bring light to them and really start talking about them. And if we make the industry more comfortable with having dialogue about things that really matter, and we make that popular, like, it's popular to talk about if your belt rank is, you're a fucking purple stripe pink belt, right? The industry would be like, I've never heard of that. That's weird. And people would be all over that person, right? Yeah. But that's the problem, is if you take these two particular cases up, and you take like the case of like the 12-year-old being groomed, you know, and you take the case of the person who has like this weird colored belt, right now everybody would jump on the weird colored belt bandwagon.
Right.
That would be the conversation. It wouldn't be about this grooming process. And maybe by doing what we're doing right now and having these open dialogues and these conversations, we can bump the narrative to start talking about shit that actually matters. And then by doing that, maybe we can stop some of it from happening. Maybe I hope this happens. Okay. I hope there's a dude right now, right, who's a crazy asshole who's watching this conversation because he either loves your content or he loves my content. Well, he damn sure don't love my content, but let's say he loves your content. All right.
Crazy a-holes seem to be most of my channel. So
And so the dude's watching this right now. I was like, I'm really curious what they have to say. And he himself right now is probably maybe almost in the processes of grooming a child. This hot 15-year-old came in and he's feeling dirty. And he's like, oh, 15-year-old, how can you be so hot at 15? And being a gross fuck.
You're so mature for your age.
Yeah, exactly. Man, so intelligent. Oh, Junior Honor Society. And so then that dude sees this video and then he knows, like without a doubt, that you or I find out about that shit and we will railroad that dude all the way to prison. Like his name will pop up in every conversation that's had. Like Dave Arnbeck, for instance, go look up Dave Arnbeck. He knows that his career is over. His life is over. His ability to teach martial arts is over because there are people like us and people in the comment sections, I'm sure, who agree with us, who are willing to jump off a damn cliff as long as that dude doesn't molest a kid. And hey, I'm willing to die on this hill, brother. So anybody out there, like, just understand, like, I will go to the ends of the earth to hunt you down and expose you for the piece of garbage you are, because that's what I do for a living. I love my job. So hopefully you enjoy being a piece of shit more than I love my job, but I promise you don't. So just understand that these conversations have real power. They really do.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying with kind of getting the culture to disagree with something. And I think you obviously get the culture to be less tolerant of grooming and pedophiles, because it is crazy that we have like known sexual assaulters that are still teaching. And then I would add on top of that, get the culture to also not tolerate the guru culture mentality of giving your coach control of like outside of that martial arts room. And then I would also add that, like, even within the realm of just martial arts, of just the punching and kicking, I feel like a lot of times we give coaches and instructors too much power, and that power then starts to bleed into other things. Because like the Lloyd Irving case, and for those of you that don't know, Lloyd Irving was a rather high up MMA coach that eventually
still coaches.
Would you say?
Still coaches.
Oh, of course he's still freaking coaches. His partial downfall was because of sexual abuse, and his gym had what was called the principle of the android, which is their philosophy was an android does not question, it simply acts out the commands. So when the coach tells you to do something, you have to do it immediately without question, and that's how you become a world champion. And obviously, first of all, that's a stupid thing to have. Like with my instructor, the moment I'm not allowed to ask why is the moment I go somewhere else. And two, that then gave him the power to bleed over into personal lives because a member of his fight team was sexually abused by him when he simply commanded her to perform sexual acts, because the culture and principle of the android had been drilled into her for quite a while at that point. So even within the realm of just martial arts, I think we give coaches too much power.
Absolutely. And then, only thing I would add to that is I would definitely say require local federal background checks for absolutely anyone, or the equivalent if you're in another country, of absolutely anyone who is employed by a martial arts facility. And I mean, that should be required for anybody who goes into a martial arts facility and you're entrusting them with your children or your own life, because I've seen a lot of people die because of abusive martial arts instructors. That's a very little thing to ask. Say that that's required. And then, obviously you don't have to disclose all of their information, but if you as an instructor aren't comfortable enough to let your students know, hey, all of our coaches and staff are federally and locally background checked, maybe you should ask yourself, why are you employing those people then? If you're not comfortable enough to look into their criminal background and history, and then I get it. Trust me, I get it, because that's a double-edged sword. I understand that there will be people who automatically what if they had something that was a non-sexually offensive case or whatever? Well, then at least the coach would know. I mean, that's up to him. But if it is like, all right, well, this dude wind up like knocking over a bank when he was like 16 years old. He got out, hasn't had any issues since then, had a rough upbringing, and now he's trying to change his life for the better. All right, cool, man. Like maybe the coach gives him a chance. But if this dude has a track record of molesting kids or sexual abuse, maybe you don't let him around kids. It
Yeah.
seems pretty simple to me, you know?
Yeah, if he's sexually abused a kid every year for the past 10 years, well, yeah, this is an obvious choice.
Yeah.
And I get that
This
shouldn't
time he
be,
won't do it.
and I get that shouldn't be a lot to require, because like you can't rent an apartment without a background check. So background checks are pretty common and they're not horribly expensive. But like we were talking about earlier, the cases that we're talking about where they did end up in a long-term relationship, a lot of these people are not repeat offenders, and these would not show up on a background check. But I think like you can do the background check to catch like the pedophiles that can continuously abuse children.
And you said something so important. You said the moment you're not allowed to question something, you would leave.
Yes.
And I think that happens with a lot of these cultures. Like, you know, we spent a long time discussing like the grooming process and the steps of becoming a student in general and how creepy that is. It's true, but it's creepy. But when it comes to not being able to question things, I think not being able to speak your mind about things like that is kind of important too. Like if you're there and you witness like, you know, this dude's not, you know, obviously if the person's doing private lessons with a child, that I would expect that there would be another adult in the room. Like I would like, yeah. I've run martial arts programs before and I do a lot of business consulting. And that's a big thing I tell them. Never be left alone in a room with a child, period, by yourself, ever. There's no reason for it. You don't need that to happen. Like there's no reason that should happen at all. Like, period.
Because I've known martial arts coaches and they've commented like people have dropped off their kid for a private lesson and they just like left. And they're like, please don't do that. Don't leave me here with your kid.
Yeah, like and I think that should be something that martial artists should make aware right off the bat. Like, hey, this is how we do it. Like you are not allowed to drop and leave. And then if you fear that that's going to be a detriment to your business, then you're not good at martial arts business.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it. If you think that is the caveat that's going to destroy your business, you're wrong. You are incorrect. That is just your own thought process eating you alive. And like, not everybody needs to do that. Like they drop off their kid and they leave. You have now turned yourself into a daycare center. You are not a martial arts facility. And then in my mind, if you allow that, then you should have way more qualifications and certifications and classes that you should have to go through if you're going to run a daycare center. But if not, you're a martial arts program, there is no drop and run shit. Be here. If you don't want to pay attention, I can't force you to pay attention, but you should definitely at least be in the room with your kid, not only for the safety of the child, but also for the liability of the instructor. Like you as an instructor, when you're like there and then there's no witnesses to whatever may or may not happen, you put yourself in a really sticky situation to where you could be accused of some shit and ruin your life, whether it happened or not. So don't put yourself in that situation.